Hello there everyone and welcome to the channel. Today I will be talking about the first few times R2D2 showed Luke Skywalker his mother Padme Amidala. This comes from the Darkness trilogy, which takes place 5 and 6 years after the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. The first book takes place 5 years after and the second and third book takes place 6 years after. When I started this series I honestly wasn't a huge fan, but as it went on I found myself really enjoying it. So I'm going to try not to spoil it too much for you guys. This video will go over all the times in the trilogy where R2 showed Luke his mother. Now, let's get into the video. Luke first discovered that R2 had memories of his parents, more importantly his mother, when he discovered an old deep reserve memory chip. There was a tarnished break in the circuit and he began to work on it and fix it, and after a while he fixed it and wanted to see what R2's deep memory reserve could show him. A list of numbers and different memories came up until he got to the damaged sector that he had recently fixed. And then it disappeared. Luke asked R2 to continue. R2 obliged, but didn't stop at the sector that Luke had asked him to. Luke told him to go to sector 222 and R2 randomized the heading and lied when Luke asked him about it. Now this back and forth went on for a while until Luke heard a female's voice saying Anakin's name. He looked and he saw a woman with brown hair, his mother, talking to his father. Luke started to watch the scene in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin tells Padme about his dreams of her dying in childbirth. R2 cuts it off saying that the file was corrupted even though it clearly wasn't. We can clearly see that R2 is trying to protect Luke and not hurt him by hiding the file and trying to lie about it. Luke was angry and assumed that someone had gone to great lengths to hide his mother and added spyware to R2D2. The next time Luke saw parts of R2's memory was when an awkward slicer named Gent helped them by working on R2. They got to see Obi-Wan visiting Padme and they have a discussion about Anakin and him being moody and admitted to the Jedi Council. Now this was in the novelization, but this wasn't in the movie. Anakin referenced it when he sensed him in the Force and asked if Obi-Wan had been there. Obi-Wan explains in this scene that he knew that the two were in love, which is where the recording stops. C-3PO tells R2 to keep playing and R2 refuses. Gent tries to work on R2 and they discover that there isn't any spyware on R2, further confirming that R2 is just trying to protect them. Now, the next time Luke sees a recording is in the second novel, and this kind of gets into spoiler territory, but basically one of the story's villains is trying to manipulate Luke and knows where R2 was created and how to get him to show his recordings. Luke sees a recording of Anakin talking with Padme. This is the scene where Anakin sensed that Obi-Wan had been there. They talk about how Anakin wants to be more powerful, that he isn't the Jedi he should be, that he wants more even though he knows he shouldn't. After this, the villain explains that since they've used it a total of 2 times, the chip will self-destruct, so they can't just open it themselves. They eventually obtained a code sequence by the villain that I talked about. That allowed them to view more of R2's memories, and they saw the recording that R2 himself had stolen from the old Jedi temple. It showed the attack on the temple and the chaos that happened. So Luke actually got to see what happened in the temple. That's pretty cool. It then showed a savage-looking Jedi murdering younglings left and right. They tried to fight back, however they were unable to. It was obviously revealed to be Anakin Skywalker, who had recently turned into Darth Vader. Luke knew that Anakin had become Darth Vader and done horrible things, however to see it in action like this really disturbed him. Mara and Luke later received the original R2 unit that had the parts they needed to add into R2's brain in order to get the information they needed. They eventually went to work on R2 and added everything they needed. Once finished, he at first refused to show anything until Luke threatened to remove his personality. We see the scene of Anakin talking to Padme after the attack on the temple from the perspective of R2D2 and C-3PO. Padme is confused and scared, and Anakin comforts her and tells her that his loyalties lie with the Chancellor and how he intends to start a new Jedi Order. Before he leaves, he sternly tells her to please stay and wait for him. Now what's kind of interesting is Jacen Solo is watching, and while Mara and Luke are weirded out by his behavior and how commanding and controlling he is towards Padme, Jacen Solo, who, spoilers, would eventually follow his grandfather's path and become Darth Sidious, doesn't see anything wrong with his behavior. This sort of plants the seeds for what he would become. Now later on, Luke is going on a mission, and similar to Anakin Skywalker, he tells R2 to stay back and that he'll be right back. R2 tells the group that Anakin said the same thing. We then go to the scene where Padme confronts Anakin on Mustafar and asks him if he killed the younglings like Obi-Wan claims. The two go back and forth, and eventually, as you know, Obi-Wan walks out of the ship and then Anakin chokes Padme. The transmission ends and Luke thinks that Anakin killed Padme and is absolutely devastated. Later on, Luke is about to fight an evil Jedi. Sort of, he's not really a Jedi, but that kind of gets into spoilers. Luke is not at all in the right headspace, and in Jacen and Mara's opinion, he isn't ready to fight the villain. He asks R2 to show him the hologram of when his mother dies. We then see R2, from his perspective, dragging Padme into the ship. She's then carried to a bed by C-3PO. He then sees the birth of himself and his sister from R2's perspective, and how Padme says they're still good in Anakin. He also finds out that his dad didn't kill his mom, which is obviously a great relief. However, he is still very, very sad and could barely contain it. Jason told him that similarly to how he can't change what happened in the Hollow, he can't change what happens in life. So there is how R2D2 showed Luke his mother. I know it may have been kind of confusing trying to avoid spoilers and to tell you what happened at the same time, so I hope it made sense. I thought it was really cool to see that Luke got a snapshot of Revenge of the Sith and how even after all these years, he could still learn from those events. This is probably the EU's way of explaining why R2 did not tell Luke any of the information after all these years. When the novel writers first started writing, I don't believe they knew that R2 had been with Anakin, and then in Revenge of the Sith we found out he didn't have his memory wiped like C-3PO, so it didn't really make sense for him not to have shared all that information without the explanation that we got, which I think makes a lot of sense and is very much in character for R2D2. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you, and may the Force be with you.